My mother stood on a stage, smiling under warm lights, and told a room full of strangers that she was the reason for my success, and everyone applauded. I was sitting in the back row, hands clenched, heart pounding, listening to my own life being rewritten right in front of me. For years, I believed that family was supposed to protect you, support you, celebrate your wins, even if they didn't fully understand the journey. I was wrong. This isn't just a story about success theft. It's about family betrayal, quiet manipulation, and the kind of emotional conflict that eats at you slowly until one day you realize you don't recognize yourself anymore. What hurts the most isn't the lie, it's how easily everyone believed it. From the outside, my life looked perfect. A self-made woman, a growing career, opportunities I once dreamed about now landing in my inbox. But behind every milestone, there was a shadow, and that shadow had my mother's voice. She always told people she sacrificed everything for me, that she pushed me when I wanted to quit, that without her guidance, I would be nothing. I stayed quiet, because speaking up felt like betrayal. And maybe that's how revenge narratives really begin, not with anger, but with silence. I told myself it didn't matter who got the credit, that success was still success, that family was complicated, and love sometimes came wrapped in ego. But the lies kept growing. Small comments turned into speeches, private exaggerations turned into public truths, and slowly my own story was no longer mine. People started congratulating her instead of me, inviting her to speak, asking her how it felt to build such a successful daughter. I would smile, nod, swallow the ache. Because how do you tell the world that your own mother is stealing your identity without sounding ungrateful, bitter, or cruel? That's the part no one warns you about. Family betrayal doesn't come with villains twirling mustaches. It comes with hugs, with "I only want what's best for you," with applause that wasn't meant for them, but they accept anyway. And the worst part? She truly believed the story she was telling. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't make a scene. I watched. I listened. And I started to understand something terrifying. This wasn't accidental. This was intentional success theft, polished with charm and delivered as love. That night, sitting in that auditorium, I made a decision. I would stop correcting her. I would stop defending myself. And I would let the truth take its time. Because some revenge narratives don't start with confrontation. They start with patience. And if you've ever felt invisible in your own life, if you've ever watched someone else wear your hard work like a costume, then you'll understand why what came next changed everything. Before anyone knew my name, before the awards, before the polite applause and LinkedIn congratulations, it was just me and a tiny desk in a rented apartment that smelled like burnt coffee and anxiety. I didn't come from privilege. I came from pressure. My mother loved to tell people she raised me to be strong. What she didn't say was how early I learned that love in our house was conditional. Growing up, I was praised when I performed. Good grades meant approval. Achievements meant affection. Silence followed anything less. She wasn't cruel in obvious ways. No yelling, no bruises, just expectations that wrapped around my throat like silk, soft, invisible, impossible to escape. When I started chasing my career, she positioned herself as my biggest supporter. She told relatives I was destined for greatness. She shared my early wins on social media like trophies. At the time, I thought it was love. What I didn't realize was that she was already practicing success theft, rehearsing how my story would sound when told from her mouth. Every late night I worked, she reminded me she believed in me when no one else did. Every risk I took, she reframed as advice she'd given me, even when she hadn't. I brushed it off, because questioning her felt like questioning my entire childhood. And that's how family betrayal works. It doesn't announce itself. It disguises itself as pride. as my career grew, so did the emotional conflict between us. She wanted details, names, numbers, connections, not out of curiosity, but ownership. When I landed my first major breakthrough, she cried, held my face, told me she knew this would happen. Then she added casually, "I always pushed you toward this." I remembered the nights she told me to choose something safer, something easier, but I didn't correct her. I never did. Friends would comment on how close we seemed, how lucky I was to have such an involved mother. I smiled and agreed. Inside, something felt off. The more successful I became, the less space there was for me in my own story. My wins became proof of her sacrifice. My resilience became evidence of her parenting. And every time I tried to reclaim my voice, guilt pulled me back. After all, wasn't I supposed to be grateful? That's the trap no one talks about in a revenge narrative like this. The villain isn't obvious. They're familiar. They tuck you in, they cheer, loudest of all, and slowly, without realizing it, you begin to disappear. I wasn't angry yet, I was confused. I told myself I was imagining things, that success was changing how I saw her, but deep down I felt it. Something was wrong, and the more I ignored it, the more power she took. By the time I noticed how far it had gone, the foundation was already cracking. I just didn't know what would break first.
The first time I realized this wasn't in my head, it happened in the smallest way. A dinner party. Nothing formal, just friends, a few colleagues, and my mother sitting at the head of the table like she belonged there. Someone asked me how I learned to negotiate so confidently. Before I could answer, my mother laughed. "Oh, that was me," she said. "I taught her everything. She used to be so timid." Everyone chuckled. I forced a smile, but something tightened in my chest. That wasn't true. I learned by failing, by being underestimated, by walking into rooms alone. But she kept going. She told stories, polished, entertaining, believable, how she pushed me to take risks, how she knew I'd be successful long before I did. Each sentence rewrote a memory. That night, I couldn't sleep. I replayed the conversation again and again, searching for innocence, for misunderstanding. Instead, I saw a pattern. This wasn't pride. This was success theft happening in real time. Over the next few months, it escalated. She started introducing herself as the brain behind my daughter's success. She asked for invites to events that had nothing to do with her. She answered emails meant for me because I'd trusted her with access once, a long time ago. When I confronted her gently, she laughed it off. "Don't be so sensitive," she said. "I'm just proud of you." That's how the family betrayal deepened. Gaslighting is subtle. It doesn't tell you you're wrong. It makes you question why you're hurt at all. I began to doubt myself. Was I being ungrateful, egotistical, petty? The emotional conflict became exhausting. Every interaction felt like a performance. Every compliment she received on my behalf took something from me. The worst part? Other people believed her. They'd say things like, "You're lucky to have such a strong mother guiding you." They'd ask her for advice on my work. I watched opportunities bend toward her shadow, and I said nothing, because exposing the truth meant risking everything: my reputation, my relationships, my image as the good daughter. This wasn't the kind of betrayal that explodes. It seeped, quietly, patiently, and somewhere along the way, I realized something terrifying. She didn't see me as separate from her. My success was hers, my identity an extension. In her mind, she wasn't stealing, she was reclaiming. That's when the fear set in. Not fear of losing credit, but fear of losing myself. I started keeping notes, dates, emails, offhand comments that didn't sit right. Not for revenge, not yet, just to remind myself I wasn't crazy. Because once you start documenting family betrayal, you understand how easily the truth can be erased, and how dangerous silence can become. By the time I realized how far this could go, the next step had already begun, and there was no turning back. The breaking point didn't come with shouting or slammed doors. It came with an email, a single line forwarded to me by a colleague who assumed it was a mistake. Per my discussion with her mother, we've decided to move forward with a different direction. Her mother, not me. I stared at the screen, rereading it until the words blurred. My hands went cold. My chest felt hollow. This wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. This wasn't exaggeration or pride. This was success theft with consequences. I dug deeper. Calendar invites I was never copied on, calls scheduled during my work hours, handled by her, decisions made without me, on projects with my name on them. And suddenly, every uneasy moment from the past year snapped into focus. The dinner party, the speeches, the access I'd given her out of trust. This wasn't accidental. This was family betrayal fully formed. I drove to her house that night, heart racing, rehearsing calm words I didn't feel. I didn't want to fight. I wanted clarity. She answered the door smiling, as if nothing was wrong. When I asked her about the email, her face barely changed. She said, "I was just helping. You've been so busy, someone had to step in." Something inside me cracked. I told her she'd crossed a line, that she'd made decisions that weren't hers to make, that this was my career, my life. She sighed, tired, almost annoyed. "You're overreacting," she said. "After everything I've done, this is how you thank me?" That sentence hit harder than any accusation. In that moment, I understood the full weight of the emotional conflict I'd been carrying. To her, my boundaries were rejection, my independence was ingratitude, and my success, something she felt entitled to manage, narrate, and claim. I felt myself shrinking, just like I did as a child. And then, silence. I stopped explaining, stopped defending, stopped trying to be understood. I realized something crucial right there, standing in her living room. Confrontation was useless, because she wasn't confused, she was convinced. Convinced that without her, I was nothing, that every win was proof of her influence, that this revenge narrative, if it ever existed, was actually about her being wronged. I left without another word. In the car, I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I sat there, breathing slowly, feeling the weight settle. This was the moment everything changed, not because I planned revenge, but because I finally accepted the truth. I couldn't win by arguing. I couldn't reclaim my story by force. If I wanted my life back, I'd have to let her keep talking, let her keep taking credit, let her go further. Because people who believe they're untouchable always expose themselves, and when karma comes, it doesn't rush, it waits.
I didn't cut her off. That's what surprised everyone later. Instead, I stepped back, quietly, deliberately. I stopped correcting her stories, stopped clarifying timelines, stopped jumping in when she spoke over me. On the surface, it looked like acceptance. In reality, it was strategy. This wasn't about punishment. It was about reclaiming myself, without triggering another round of emotional conflict. I changed passwords, removed shared access, politely redirected emails back to me when they slipped through. No announcements, no confrontations, just boundaries, enforced in silence. She didn't notice at first. She was too busy enjoying the spotlight. She leaned harder into the revenge narrative she'd unknowingly created, where she was the mastermind behind my rise. She booked speaking opportunities, accepted interviews, told my story with confidence. And here's the thing about success theft. It only works if the thief understands the work. She didn't. When questions got technical, she stumbled. When asked about decisions, she generalized. When pressed for specifics, she redirected with emotion. I watched it happen, over and over.
People nodded politely, but their eyes changed. Meanwhile, I kept working, quietly rebuilding relationships she didn't know about, reintroducing myself, without explanation, to people who mattered. Not as her daughter, as a professional. The family betrayal stopped hurting as much once I realized something important. She needed my success to feel whole. I didn't need her approval anymore. I started documenting, not for leverage, but for clarity. Emails she sent without authority, claims she made that contradicted public facts, invitations she accepted that required expertise she didn't have. I didn't expose her. I let consistency do that for me. There's a strange power in silence when you're no longer afraid of being misunderstood. The emotional conflict shifted. It wasn't between us anymore. It was inside her. She began asking more questions, fishing for details, needing reassurance. I gave her nothing. Not coldness, not anger, just distance. And in that space, something fascinating happened. People started reaching out to me directly. Not because I complained, but because patterns became visible. They wanted clarification. They wanted depth. They wanted the real story. And slowly, without any announcement, credit started returning to its source. That's the part no one tells you about a real revenge narrative. You don't have to push. You just have to stop holding the lie together. By the time she noticed the shift, it was already too late. The audience was listening more carefully now, and she was running out of lines. Karma didn't arrive loudly. It didn't embarrass her in public or expose her in one dramatic moment. It arrived through absence. She stopped getting invited. At first, she blamed scheduling conflicts, then gatekeepers, then jealous people who didn't understand her vision. But the truth was simpler. People had started asking follow-up questions, and her answers weren't enough. One afternoon, I received a call from an organizer I'd worked with years ago. He sounded hesitant, careful. "We've had your mom speak at a few events," he said, "but something feels off. We'd really like you to join the next panel." Not to replace her, to clarify. That's how success theft collapses, not with accusation, but with comparison. On stage, I didn't mention her. I didn't correct her stories. I simply spoke. Clearly, confidently, with details only lived experience gives you. The room leaned in. Afterward, people thanked me for my honesty, for my clarity, for finally putting language to things they'd felt but couldn't name. Word travels fast when it's grounded in truth. Soon, invitations addressed to her started coming to me instead. Emails that once included her name quietly didn't. She noticed. She called more often, sounded anxious, and asked why people weren't looping her in anymore. I told her the truth, gently. They want to hear from me. Silence. That was the moment the family betrayal fully turned inward on her. She wasn't angry. She was confused, because in her mind, she hadn't done anything wrong. Watching karma unfold wasn't satisfying in the way movies promise. It was sad. She had built an identity on borrowed credit, and when it was returned, there was nothing left to stand on. The emotional conflict didn't disappear. It transformed. I no longer felt rage, or even resentment. I felt free. Free to speak without flinching, free to succeed without being edited, free to exist as myself, not as someone's extension. She still tells her version of the story sometimes, but fewer people listen, and the ones that matter don't need convincing. That's the quiet justice in a real revenge narrative. No exposure posts, no dramatic confrontations, just truth repeated consistently until it becomes undeniable. Karma didn't punish her. It corrected the record. And for the first time, my success finally sounded like my own.
After everything settled, people assumed I felt victorious. They expected relief, satisfaction, closure. What I felt was quieter than that. There's a strange grief that follows family betrayal, even when karma feels fair. You don't just lose trust, you lose the version of family you thought you had. For a long time, I questioned myself. Could I have stopped it sooner? Should I have been louder?
Was silence really the right choice? That emotional conflict didn't vanish the moment credit returned to me. It lingered, asking uncomfortable questions. But healing doesn't come from rewriting the past, it comes from understanding it. I started seeing our relationship clearly, not through anger, but through pattern. My mother wasn't evil, she was afraid. Afraid of being invisible, afraid of aging without relevance, afraid that my success meant her own story was over. Understanding that didn't excuse the success theft, but it released me from carrying her shame. The most important lesson wasn't about revenge, it was about boundaries. I learned that love without respect becomes control, that silence can be strength, but only when it's chosen, not forced, and that a healthy revenge narrative doesn't end with destruction, it ends with separation. We speak now, but differently. No shared access, no blurred roles, no ownership over each other's lives. And for the first time, our conversations feel honest because they're limited. I stopped needing her validation, and in doing so, I stopped giving her power over my story. That's the quiet truth behind most success theft stories. The hardest part isn't reclaiming credit, it's accepting that the person who hurt you may never fully understand why. I don't tell this story to villainize my mother. I tell it because so many people live inside this kind of family betrayal without words for it. They think they're ungrateful, too sensitive, wrong. They're not. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't confrontation, it's choosing yourself without apology. I didn't become colder, I became clearer, and clarity, I've learned, is the most peaceful kind of freedom. For a long time, I wondered why this story stayed with me, why, even after the credit returned and the noise faded, it still felt unfinished. Then I realized something. Stories like mine aren't rare, they're just rarely named. Success theft doesn't always come from enemies. Sometimes it comes from the people who loved you first and loved you wrong. And that's what makes it so confusing, because when the betrayal comes wrapped in family, it doesn't feel like anger at first. It feels like guilt, doubt, obligation. You start shrinking to keep the peace. You start sharing credit to avoid conflict. You tell yourself it's easier to let it go, until one day you don't recognize your own voice anymore. If you're listening to this and something feels uncomfortably familiar, I want you to hear this clearly. You're not selfish for wanting ownership of your life. You're not ungrateful for setting boundaries. And you're not cruel for stepping out of someone else's shadow. Every revenge narrative doesn't need fireworks. Some end with distance, with clarity, with the quiet decision to stop explaining yourself. The most powerful moment in my story wasn't when karma struck. It was when I stopped needing it to, when I understood that my success didn't need witnesses, only integrity, that my worth didn't increase when others acknowledged it. It had always been there. The emotional conflict didn't disappear overnight. Real healing rarely does. But it softened. It made room for something better than anger. Peace. I don't know how my mother tells this story now. I don't control that anymore. What I do control is how I live it, with clear boundaries, with earned confidence, and a sense of self no one else gets to narrate. And maybe that's the real lesson in stories of family betrayal. You don't win by proving them wrong. You win by no longer needing to prove anything at all. So I'll leave you with this. If someone you trusted took credit for your hard work, if someone close to you blurred the line between love and control, if you've ever felt erased inside your own success, what would you have done in my place? Would you confront them, walk away, or choose a quieter path, one that lets truth speak for itself? I'm curious to know, because sometimes hearing each other's stories is how we finally reclaim our own.